Hi, Alex. Welcome to the Legacy series.
Well, thank you. I think about like sorority life. I mean, that's when I use
Oh,
the word legacy.
oh,
And my
totally.
daughter just went through Rush and she was a legacy.
Well, I know. And you and I met each other in that stage of life.
Yes, we did. And that was probably the last time I thought about that word until just a few years ago.
Well, and I do want to talk about that word because I think legacy, well, first of all, it holds a lot of different ideas for different people. And also, it can be leaving a legacy in different ways. But on this
Mm-hmm,
series, we're talking specifically about family legacy.
mm-hmm,
But how would you kind of nail down even the definition of legacy? What does legacy really mean? Because we all want it. We all are
mm-hmm,
like, yeah, that's what we want. We want that. But what is it?
mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think it can be loaded. It can imply something good, but the truth is, we can leave a legacy that's good or not so good in every area of our lives. I was thinking about it. The interview we did with Lauren McAfee and her mom. So they're the Hobby Lobby family. Her mom owns Hobby Lobby. I don't know how else to say it.
She owns it.
I mean, I guess I don't know. It's probably like on the stock market or something. But anyway, their family. It's a family business, so it's been in their family. They when we did their interview with them, I remember the mom saying something about legacy is what remains when you leave, and that to me was kind of a filter. Like I can put things through that sieve and say, okay, what remains? And she said, only so many things remain for eternity. So that's what we as a family, she's talking for herself, that's how we have decided where we want to invest our time, talent, treasure. And that has really stuck with me, that the legacy is what remains. And so I've thought about it a little bit like fingerprints. When you say you can tell somebody's fingerprints are on something like a project or a person, even. So that's how I've thought of it in recent years. How have you thought of it?
Yeah, it really is. When we're at a funeral, or it's like we know it when we see it. And I think especially when we're at funerals, because we're paying attention to the legacy of the person who just passed away. And we're paying attention to how they lived. Like, what was their life like? Who
Mm-hmm.
were they like? And, I like the definition of legacy, that legacy is not something we leave for people, it's something we leave in people. And that's kind of similar to what you're saying. A little bit different, but similar. And so I was thinking about this moment at my grandma's funeral. So it was actually at her graveside. And my mom was on her knees. It was actually a very tender moment at the graveside. My mom was on her knees and the casket was below her and they were about to cover it. And she was putting flowers on there and she was crying. And it was kind of this awkward moment where everyone was standing back and my mom was in front, but she was alone.
Mm-hmm.
And there was the most touching moment, one of the most touching moments of my life. My 10-year-old at the time, Hudson, he stepped out from the crowd. Oh, I'm going to tear up thinking about it. And put his hands on her back. He walked forward and put his hands on her back and just stood there with her. And I thought, wow, this is kind of a sacred moment. And this is legacy. Like, what, we're 5 minutes in and I'm crying. What in the world? Um, but this is that sense of you're not alone and we belong together. And because my mom's older and Hudson was only 10, there was something really beautiful about the age difference there and this connector of like, for whatever reason, Hudson, he felt close enough to my mom that he felt comfortable on his own stepping out and making that gesture. And he knew my grandma well enough. he called her great grandma. He knew her well enough that he knew the pain that we all were in, including my mom and himself. So there was that sense of like this awareness of the moment, which was really, I think it points to legacy. And that's what I mean. It's hard to measure, but you know it when you see it happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about how am I leaving somebody or something different because of who I am? And so in that example, the underlying current is that who your grandmother was impacted who your mom is, impacted who you are, impacted who Hudson is. And that's the thread that goes through. If what we're leaving, what remains behind, is like I said, it can be good or it can be bad. Right. And so I want people to hear that maybe if you're listening and you're feeling like, ooh, family legacy, oh yeah, I got one, and it's not pretty.
Right.
That this is the opportunity to ask yourself, what do I want our family trajectory to be? And I remember Shauna Niequist one time talking about something about, I think, just habits. And she said, when you're steering a ship, if you go just a little bit degree off course, over time, you're going to go really off course, just that little angle. And how do we, as adults now, we're kind of in a family, we're in the in-between place. And I would think that would be true for a lot of our listeners. We maybe have a generation ahead of us that is kind of in the sunset phase of life. And we have young adults and teenagers that are starting to spread their wings and decide where they're headed. And we're steering the ship a little bit and deciding, as a family, where are we headed? But also, we always can't control our whole family, right? We can only control who we are. So how am I speaking into the direction that I want our family to head? And what decisions am I making that are steering it? And I have agency. I can do that, even if I come from a place of hurt or addiction or abuse, whatever it might be, that I have the capability to make that change. Now, it may require a lot of work. And if you're listening and thinking, yes, and I need to do a lot of work, go for it. We're here to cheer you on. But I just want to encourage people that they do have agency to change the storyline of where that's headed.
Absolutely. And you and I know lots of people who are in that camp and are doing it and doing it well. And I even think about this family I know, very close family to us. And the son actually came to Christ through Young Life. And he was the first in his family. And over the next 2 years, his mom, his dad, his brother, they all actually came to Christ. And, even thinking about how one family, and now, like, a lot of them are on Young Life staff, and now they have kids and they're, and it's just so interesting how ground zero starts somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it starts with us or it started a couple generations back, it has to start somewhere. And so, if you're ground zero, good for you, because think about the generations forward who are going to be different, possibly different, because of the decisions you're making now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. So one of the things that I talk about a lot in my coaching, because this is a huge part of what I do, is kind of helping people to prioritize their lives and figure out what's important to me. And so one of the concepts that I use is really starting with the end in mind and working backwards from there. So maybe you've heard it, or listeners have maybe heard it said, start with your eulogy. What do you want said about you at your funeral? And then work backwards and actually create your day-to-day schedule more around that. So Alex, talk to me a little bit about that concept. I mean, what do you want your eulogy to say? And what are your thoughts when you think about that?
Well, my first thought is last night, Derek and I were watching the season finale of the morning show, season 2. And I'm not going to do a spoiler, but the news was announcing somebody's death and describing this person's life and why this person had notoriety. And Derek said, well, gosh, I hope they don't say that about me at my funeral. And just even if you can't think about what you want them to say, think about what you don't want them to say. That could also be a starting place.
Yes.
Of, well, I know I don't want this. For me, I'm not so interested in accomplishments. And I think sometimes a eulogy is, this is what this person's life was about in productivity. This was their work. These were the people they raised. This was the building that they donated to. I don't know. Those things are important. And I think they're evidence of a heart. But I want more people to talk about my character and how they felt when they were with me, and what about the way I lived inspired them to live with meaning too. So that's what I think about more than I want to have written 10 books and I want to be on the New York Times bestseller list. Now, if that's coming to mind for you, those goals, good for you. I'm not a 3 on the Enneagram. Like, I don't think in goals way. I think, more, I don't know how you describe that, but I think that's okay to have more of maybe a bucket list kind of approach, because that will help you make some decisions in your life. If I want to take my kids to 5 different countries before they graduate from high school, or, you have some things that helps you make a life. So those things are good. But at the end, for me, what I want more is I want my character to be in line with promoting the gospel. Yeah. Because I think about what I don't want. I don't want people to say that there was a disconnect between what I said and how I lived.
Yeah. That resonates so deeply with me. Well, it's interesting because I've never had a client, when we're going through some of those exercises, I've never had a client actually who the only thing they focused on was their accomplishments. It's almost always around primary relationships, actually. So, or spirituality, how, kind of their life with God or their life with others. So it is interesting, no matter how accomplished they are.
Right. I mean, those books and studies that show at the end of somebody's life, what do people wish they had done more of or less of? And no one ever says, well, I mean, probably a few people, but statistically speaking, it's never, I wish I'd worked more. And yet we're so driven to do and produce. And that's our culture, but maybe, yeah.
So, but I think it is a good exercise, as we're looking at, like, how do we grab on to this idea of legacy a little bit? That's a really practical exercise to do. Write your eulogy. Or if you don't want to write a eulogy, that feels too morbid, just write, okay, I'm 80 and I'm still alive and kicking. What do I, looking back on my life, what do I want to be true? So that could be another way that you approach it, too. But just, it's a really practical exercise to get us zeroed in on the most important things.
Yeah.
Well, let's also talk about this idea of culture, which is something I actually really love talking about because I've seen it done well and not well. And it's something I'm fascinated by. Why do certain cultures work and why do certain cultures not work? Meaning, like, the culture of a space. So whether it's a workplace or a school or a family, what role do you think culture plays in legacy?
Well, if we're thinking about what remains after we're gone, and the idea of how did people feel when they were with us, then the cultural norms that we set in the environments that we have some control over are going to make a difference. And how we respond in places that have cultural norms we can't control, which, because like you mentioned, some places we may not have control over our workplace culture. But hello, how can we then stand out as being people who aren't toxic, who are good listeners, who, I mean, even today, I walked into a room and I was surprised by the lack of response other people gave me, like acknowledgement that I was there. And I thought, okay, I can't control their behavior, but I can control how I'm going to respond to that. And that's a part of leaving the legacy. It's what remains after I leave the room, is just, that's a little tiny sliver. It's not a big lifetime. It's just a moment in time where I can say, I'm leaving this room better than I found it. I don't know. I was at a MOPS group the other day and a mom was sharing, and she said that this year she has decided that she wants to leave conversations better than she found them.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I thought, wow, that's a goal. That's a goal.
That is a goal. Wow, what a great goal, considering, like, think
Mhm.
about all the conversations that have gone wrong in the last 2 years. That's a good goal. I love that.
Mm-hmm. So how about you? How do you feel like culture impacts legacy?
Well, I've been really impacted by our children's high school principal, who I've talked about him before, especially to you, because I like talking about him because he's so impactful. But literally, this guy, I mean, he has a mobile desk and he goes around the halls, or he did. He actually moved, he's moving up to superintendent. So we're having to say goodbye to him. But literally, like, goes around the halls on his mobile desk so he can be present.
Mm-hmm.
He knows people's names, everything, even during COVID, every single thing he said, it was framed in a way that was positive, clear, and kind. Positive, clear, kind. I'm like, this guy is amazing. I'm like, the world's falling apart, and somehow this guy is just rising to the top.
Reframing it all.
Yes. I mean, he's just like, he's so inspiring as a leader. And I thought, that is like, whatever he's doing, that's it, right? He cares deeply about coaches, teachers, kids. He's present. He's in the halls with his mobile desk running around. He's framing things to parents in a way that's positive and life-giving. And he never shames kids, never shames athletes. Like, it's just so beautiful. And you think, okay, the impact you're having is immense. Like, I can't tell you how positive the culture is at their school. And I know it's because of his leadership, because he was there for 29 years. That makes an impact. And you think about how long you're with your family.
Mm-hmm.
We have the same opportunity, just those small actions, day after day after day after day. There was a guy this morning, I help organize the FCA at the high school. And the speaker this morning was someone I knew in high school. He was a young teacher back and coach back then. Well, since he had a freak accident body surfing and is paralyzed. And he came and spoke this morning at FCA, and he was funny. He was full of faith.
Mm-hmm.
He's also paralyzed. And he was going to be a professional baseball player, and now he can't even throw a baseball with his grandkids. And yet, like, the positivity and the faith and the worldview that he had, it was so incredibly inspiring. And I thought, as I was thinking about our conversation today, think about the legacy he is leaving by his actions and his words and the way he lives in his grandchildren. Nope, he can't throw a ball to them, but he is throwing something much greater. And that is like this deep, unwavering faith. I mean, it was incredibly moving. And when you see it, that's what I mean. When you see it, you know it, you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think, wow, what an impact he must be having on his family because of the way he lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just listening today in the car because this week was Veterans Day, and NPR asked people to phone in, so in their own voices, leave voicemails about veterans that impacted them. And they were all my uncle, people in their family, their grandfather, one woman talked about her grandmother who served in World War II. And it gets to the idea of serving something greater that we seem to be losing as a larger community. I feel like this idea of sacrifice for the sake of the larger group, and that's part of that legacy impact that stands out when people see that somebody has sacrificially given something. And that principle, he is leaving, but the imprint, the fingerprints are going to be there. And it's like that ripple effect that because he led other people well, created that culture, then they are then able to carry it on. And that is what legacy is, leaving something that other people can grasp onto that can then continue. And if you think about being people of faith, we only know of the gospel because people for generations have carried the story and stewarded it for their generation so that we might have access to it today. So that always inspires me to think, okay, if people did that for me, my job then is to steward this good news for my generation so that 4 generations from now, it's still available to people.
Yeah. So as we're talking about this, I feel like we can get in this space of like, yes, this sounds amazing and this is what I want to do. But then when it comes to like the practical day-to-day life, all of a sudden we just kind of respond and do what needs to be done, but we're not really living by our highest priorities or the things that really will last and we will leave a legacy through. And so can you speak to that a little bit and just what that struggle looks like in your own life?
Oh yeah. Because like I said, I didn't think about even like the concept of legacy until we were interviewing the Hobby Lobby people. And I was like, wow, they're really doing something with their lives. And the people before them, that was the thing, is like they were talking about the generation before them. And then anyway, I am constantly responding to the urgency of the immediate. Somebody needs to go to soccer, and do we have dinner plans, and what are we going to do for Christmas break? Like that's about as far forward as I'm thinking these days, is maybe 2 months out. I'm not thinking 20 years or 20 generations out. So we have to take time to ask ourselves these questions of what is important to me. So kind of that eulogy kind of question, the big picture, what do I want to leave behind? But then we have to figure out how to make it part of our daily life. And that statement that I have talked about so often and written about in almost every book, do what only you can do, has been a really good filter for me, because I'm the only one who can be my kid's mom. I'm the only one who can be my husband's wife. So that right there helps me reprioritize some things. And then asking the question, what will matter a year from now, 5 years from now, a generation from now? And to take that long view when we are trying to make a decision as a family and we're getting stuck, which we often tend to because we've got a lot of overthinkers in our house. And so we don't have people who are just, decisive and like, well, we got to make a decision. So here it is. We got to weigh all the options. So we can get paralyzed. And so to ask ourselves, what will matter a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that helps also remove a lot of stuff, because we think, oh, and actually this decision isn't that big a deal. So it takes the pressure off. Or, oh, no, actually there's a lot of clarity now. This is a big deal and this will matter. So we're going to make this a priority. So those are the kind of the 2 frameworks that help me sift through in my day-to-day life, either in the tasks that need to be done or the decisions that need to be made when I get in this whirlwind hurricane of responding to the urgent.
It's really helpful. Those are really helpful questions.
Well, what about you? How do you're probably more decisive than I am. I know you are. I shouldn't say probably. Everybody who's listening knows this is true. How do you not lose track of what's most important?
Well, I really like what you said. But I will also say that for me, I think prayer has been a way for God to give me spiritual eyes to see beyond what's currently in front of me that I need. I mean, I need those spiritual eyes to see sometimes because I'm just really discouraged about something. And I think, what kind of legacy am I leaving? And you know what I'm saying? Like that kind of moment where you're like,
does any of this matter, God?
Yeah, right. And so I think in those moments, just allowing God to give me something greater, and really to give me eyes to see that the seeds being planted matter, even if I never see them come to fruition. And so, that what is my responsibility to do, and how can I focus on that and not the results or the outcome? Okay. And like, period. Right. Like that is so important. And so has been so really transformational for me, just really focusing on what I can do and what I'm called to do, not what's going to happen on the other side of that. So that's just helpful. That prayer time is key for me and really important as I read scripture and meditate and just ask God for what is mine to do. And then I'd say the other thing is just accountability to my closest people, of, asking questions. Like, my daughter actually taught me this one. She heard it from an Enneagram coach, but you ask the question, what's it like being on the other side of me right now? That's a great question. I mean, it's a great question if you're in an argument, but it's also just a great question of like, I've been a little stressed or lately, or I've been this or that, or, what is it like for you to be on the other side of me? And then they can tell you, well, I'm receiving so much joy and kindness and love. And you just have this moment together.
Because you're never going to ask that question when things are going well, right? Like,
yeah.
What's it like on Christmas morning being on the other side of it's when things aren't going well. So yeah, but it's a good question.
Yeah. Another one is, how can I better support you? Because that will actually get to like what I'm not doing. And then another one is, what would fill your cup right now? So it gives me even just a different way to frame that question of, so if my primary people are my priority, then sometimes I just need to ask them, where are they at? And maybe it doesn't even have to do with me at the moment, but what would fill your cup right now? That's a great question, because it helps me to know what I can be doing to just be a blessing to them in their lives.
How do you then think about that in terms of like big picture priorities? Because they may be telling, again, like they may be like, well, I need to go to soccer and you need to drive me. That's what I need from you right now. How do you then mentally, at least, put it in a category of, this is working towards my bigger priority?
Well, it's interesting because I think it goes back to the long view exercise we were talking about, because so I'm actually in a season where I've lost all my drivers. I'm in the car more than I've been in years, because I'm driving 2 kids around to everything under the sun, to school, back to school, after school, sports, nighttime games. Like, I am like in the car. And so my day has just been broken into all these pieces and I can't get anything done. And I literally every day I go, thank you, God, for the opportunity I have to like discipline myself, right? Of just, thank you for this opportunity that I have a car and I have children. I mean, right now, children includes our foreign exchange student, who I get to serve in this way, because my big long-term goal is actually to have this beautiful relationship lifelong with my son Stetson and our foreign exchange student. Hey, I mean, we've got him for a year. He's becoming family at this point. And so long-term goal is that, Well, what that looks like right now at age 15 is me getting in the car and taking him to all these places that are important for him to go to. And so, but it's a discipline because it's
Mhm.
hard. And there are so many times I do not want to get in that car. But that's when I have to do that mental training myself and shift the way that I'm seeing it and grab on to the bigger goal. Because I can say this car ride actually is stability for him and dependability on my end.
Mhm.
He's learning to trust me that when I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'm there and I'm helping him in his life to get where he needs to go. That's building a trust that will have our whole lives, which goes way beyond the carpool.
Mhm. Right. Okay. Anything else practical as we kind of start coming to a close on this episode? What are some other practical things that you do?
Schedule. And that we've talked about this a lot, but schedule priorities. So you and I, Christmas remaking at the moment,
Mhm.
I'm actually scheduling over the holidays the things my kids really want to do. And one, it's bringing them into the process, it's meeting a need there. Just by them having some say and some, just freedom with what we do and how we spend the holidays together. But then it's also putting it on the calendar so that that's priority for me, so that other things will get moved aside because they're the most important thing and they're the what they want to do. That's the most important. So, it's just the reality is that we value what we spend our time on.
Mm.
And so let's make our calendars reflect that by pre-scheduling things that are important to us.
Mhm.
So, for example, I went through the last couple of weeks. We've been driving so much to all these places. I haven't seen my parents very much. And I'm like, stopped. I said, this isn't what I want. I want to see them more. So, in this season. And so I'm like, okay, let's get this on the calendar and this on the calendar, and I'll be there this day. And then it happens
Right.
because it's on the calendar.
Yeah. You've taught me that.
I mean, it really does. I mean, the other thing is, I would say, set up for me, what's worked is setting up systems that make it easy for me to live by my goals and values. So, like an example of that would be if I'm kind of a doer. So, the moment my feet start hitting the ground, it's like, okay, it's time to exercise. It's time to get the dishwasher unloaded. It's time, and I'm like
Mhm.
in movement. So, I've started to put my Bible study on my bedside stand. And before I get out of bed, I do it right then.
Mhm.
Well, that just sets me up for success. Do I want to do that? Every day I do. But if I get up and get going, a lot of times I'm just into the mode of going.
Yeah.
And so then it's harder to stop. So just setting ourselves up for success a little
Mm.
bit is helpful.
Mhm. Right. To talk about, yeah.
Do you have any last practicals you want to share?
Well, I think we've kind of hit on this, but the idea of time, talent, and treasure, I mean, that's what we have to give away is our time, the things we're good at, and then our resources, whether that's money or more tangible things. And to just do an evaluation every once in a while. And when you're asked to do something, I mean, I know our listeners are like us, we get asked to do stuff all the time, whether it's for school or for work or for, and
Stuff.
we could do a lot of stuff, but
Mhm.
to filter it through, okay, this is my time and my talent normally, if we're doing, is this how I want to steward it? Does it meet my long-term goals of what I want to remain when I leave? And when we put it in those terms, it usually is pretty clear. And then treasure, which is often money, giving, which this time of year people are thinking about giving, but also our things like our homes and our cars and how we spend our money. All of that, is that how we want to, knowing we can't take any of it with us? But just how are we investing literally, financially in the legacy that we want to leave behind?
Mhm. Yeah. It's a great word to end on. Well, this is a great topic. I feel like this topic is just so worthwhile for us to stop and pause and really think about.
Mhm.
So as we are, continuing, we've got two more episodes in this series. And I just encourage people that as you're listening over the next few weeks, I mean, take some time, do some journaling, write some things down, get some things on your calendar, and really just stop and put into practice the things that you're hearing.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.